welcome everybody to the Freedom Hub Working Group. We're at our May 22nd edition. We've got a hot topic for today, of course, as usual. Just as a little setup on what's been happening as a reminder for those that have getting or have not been seeing, this is the copy, I hadn't shown this in the past, of the weekly notice that goes out on Mondays. And it always gives you the rundown on who we just had and the links to view the prior. And then of course we've got our channel up on Brighteon now, which gives us just a chance to be able to see all of the various videos. So we've got a variety of them up there already for your dining and dancing pleasure. And then also it teases you as to who's forthcoming. So this is an announcement that Theodora and Sharon and Melissa are going to be here today, and the links about them. And then also our links to Facebook and LinkedIn, and then also some prior ones. We try to showcase some of the ones we've done in the past and give you a direct link to view those. So be aware of that. And like I said, anyone you want to be a part of this, as long as they register, whether they come or not, they will always get this Monday so they can be able to review this on their own time on their own time. Stumbling around there for a quick minute. So I was going to say at this point, real quick, let's just tease out for a little bit while we wait for some others to potentially come as to what we've got going on in the upcoming weeks, and then we'll dig into today's topic.
Jeff, I guess that signals me. This is Charlie Fromm, and I work with Jeff in health disruption commercially. And given our political backgrounds, we love this weekly political webinar that we have maintained for quite a few months now, and we have this event slot booked through Christmas. So believe it or not, I'm not booking anyone else until next year. So I'll do a quick preview of the 4 coming weeks. So next week, we're moving to entrepreneurship. We all need motivation, and we have one of the biggest motivational speakers out there, Bob Berg from Go Giver. You know, all of us like to do a little activism and also a little entrepreneurship. So that's going to be the topic next week. In 2 weeks, we have a whistleblower, the CIA jailed friend of ours, John Kiriakou, who blew the whistle on torture, and he suffered for it. And he will talk about whistleblower rights. If we can't let whistleblowers tell us what's going on in the bowels of government, we really can't know what to reform. In 3 weeks, we have the icon of the Liberty Movement, Larry Reed, founder of the Foundation for Economic Education. He's going to take us on a whirlwind tour of history with some quotes from presidents to sort of use their best legacies on how to judge what's going on today. And then in 1 month, we'll have the state think tank from Hawaii. Joe Kent is their leader, and they are trying to get something repealed called the Jones Act, which really gums up transportation and leads to all the trucks and the highways and underutilization of all of our waterways and rivers around the country. And it especially hurts our island states like Hawaii or Alaska or Puerto Rico, jacks up their prices. So we get in the weeds, we get general, we get historic. That's coming up in the next 4 weeks, Jeff.
Sounds like an interesting calendar dates to set, so that's fantastic. Well, today we've got a topic that's, you know, we've planned this a while ago, but it's amazing how much it's cycling into the news right now, and that's all about the idea of 5G rolling in here on all of us. And so we're going to have a number of people here today, some key players in that. So we've got Theodora Scarato, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep.
Dr. Sharon Goldberg and Melissa Chalmers. And so we're going to let them present for a minute on their own screen, so you'll get to see from firsthand kind of what they're up to and what we need to do to kind of roll up our sleeves and help them out a little bit. Charles, if you want to do the honors and just kind of do a little setup on their organization here before we flip it over there.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. And Melissa, Theodora, and Sharon, thank you for tag teaming this important event. What's interesting for Jeff and my libertarian world is we have a lot of corporate-funded think tanky friends in DC who tell us the science is settled in so many things, and telecom is one of those sacred cows. But you know, if we're honest about liberty, we know that we have a right not to be harmed and have redress of grievances and to be free of fraud. So while 5G is enticing with all the quick internet, you know, along with some other issues, there's some troubles with the science and what's being reported. And so I'm excited, and so is Jeff, to really get a balanced approach on this issue and talk about, you know, what are the health concerns and how do we balance technology with safety. So Jeff, that's my intro.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Theodora, I am now flipping the screen control over to you. There you go. I can see your screen.
Okay,
And I'm
great.
going to let you fill in any of the gaps that Charles may be neglected to mention, and then let you take it from there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right?
Excellent.
Great. So Environmental Health Trust is a scientific think tank, and we work on environmental health issues with a focus right now on wireless cell phone radiation and 5G. So I'm excited to be talking to you today, and also to be with Sharon Goldberg of the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, and Melissa Chalmers, who is an A320 airplane captain. We're going to be talking, let's see if I can make this next one. There you go. About, wait, this little control panel. I'm moving away. Okay.
Yeah, just hit that little shrink arrow.
Yeah, I got it.
Good.
About the race to 5G wireless and the health issues that it presents. So we currently live in a sea of microwave radiation with our cell phones and all manner of wireless devices that we have now, but the genie is only begun to come out of the bottle, because the 5th generation is being deployed, tested in some cities. It's the new type of wireless network to tie together the Internet of Things. And amidst this, there are over 240 scientists calling for a moratorium who have published in the peer-reviewed literature based on established health effects of wireless radiation. And what this means for us, that most people are surprised to find out, and often find out when it's already happened, is that it is going to mean small cells, which is an industry created term, because there's nothing small about it, which means kind of mini cell towers, cell antennas put on our streetlights, utility poles, bus stops, in our rights of way. And we're talking about 800,000, and there are estimates of up to 2 million in the United States alone. And so across the country, there are, at every level of government, federal, state, and local, streamlining policies moving forward so that neighborhoods are losing their local authority in terms of where these are placed. And you can see here a picture that someone sent this to me. This is their bedroom window, and there is the quote unquote small cell put right outside their window. 5G is going to use current frequencies and modulations, actually current frequencies in use now, and add in higher frequencies, millimeter waves, that have never been used commercially before. And it brings with it privacy issues related to the hacking that can happen, and also data harvesting, property values related to the installations in people's front yards, energy consumption, psychosocial impacts as to how all this technology will impact us. And of course, as we're going to talk about today, it will increase the environmental levels of radiation. And this is an example of a neighborhood near me, about 10 minutes away. All of those little triangles are the proposed sites for new installations. You can see they're like at least every 10 homes, and that's just the beginning. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Goldberg once I figure out, here we go, who is going to speak about the health aspects. And I'm going to manage the slides while she talks. Thank you.
Thank you, Theodora. So as Theodora mentioned, I'm an internal medicine physician. I've recently moved to Santa Fe, and I'm voluntary faculty at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. I got interested, so essentially my background is that I'm an academic hospital medicine physician. I did that for 15 years, and I got interested in electromagnetic fields after my department administrator at the University of Miami gave me my new cell phone. You know, they give faculty phones, one of the perks of the job, and they gave me a new phone. It was an iPhone. I took it home. I made a call with it. And after a 20-minute call, my middle finger was burning like a diabetic neuropathy. And it was literally it didn't resolve. It took about 4 or 5 days for my finger to get back to normal. So that was years ago, but that was what got me interested in wireless radiation. And I started reading about the health effects of wireless radiation and links with chronic disease. And it was really shocking, as someone who is in academic internal medicine, to read that all these conditions that we were treating in the hospital and in the clinic actually had basic science links, and even more than basic science, clinical studies in certain cases showing that there were clear links with these diseases and wireless radiation. So that's my story. That's how I got into it. And subsequently, I did some training in building biology, and I learned how to do electromagnetic field assessment and do remediation. So I have some technical knowledge that, that the average physician does not have. So I think what's really important to understand is that there's a lot of misinformation put out by the wireless industry. And I think the key point here that everyone needs to understand is that we don't have any health protective guidelines out there. And I know, talking to a libertarian audience, I imagine that you guys are not really big on government regulation. But I think that we do have certain circumstances that we'll probably all agree that we do need government guidance in order to protect our health. And a good example of that would be our Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I mean, I can't imagine what the world would look like if there were no laws governing the sales of products that use ionizing radiation or nuclear isotopes. Our health would be completely different. So it's the same case with wireless radiation. And really what I'm going to be talking about now is microwave radiation. Theodora, do we have the spectrum slide, or is that maybe too complicated to get that?
I can,
okay.
It'd be
Don't
too
worry about it. We'll
right there right now.
We'll skip that for the sake of time. Okay, so the point that I'm making here is that the FCC has used, the wireless industry refers to FCC guidelines whenever, in legal situations, whenever they want to back up their claim that they're not breaking any laws, certain cell towers, certain emissions. If it conforms to these FCC guidelines that we have, there's no problem. But what everyone needs to understand is that these guidelines are decades old, and they are not relevant to health protection because they only protect people from being burned, from thermal injury. The second thing is that these guidelines are very clear that they are not applicable to chronic exposures. They are only applicable to exposures up to 30 minutes long. So it's an acute exposure. So they're not even relevant to the type of exposure that our population is exposed to now. The third thing is that these guidelines were developed by engineers. Doctors and public health officers, people with health training, were not consulted. So that is a really important issue for everyone to understand, that really no one is looking out for our health. The second thing is that the products that we use now, cell phones, tablets, video games, smart speakers, all of these devices that emit microwave radiation were brought to market without any pre-market safety testing. So they were just approved. And the third thing is that we have no oversight or monitoring of our current exposures. So we've just, over the past couple decades, we're just seeing this stacking of exposures that the American public is being exposed to, different frequencies, different devices, it's just more and more and more. And no one's measuring it. No one really understands how much we're being exposed to. And at the same time, when you look at public health, I think we can all agree that health in the United States is just going down the drain. We have multiple epidemics that we're dealing with, and I don't think there's ever been a time when the CDC website is tracking so many different epidemics. It used to just be diabetes, obesity. Now we have insomnia. We have suicide epidemic, a major suicide epidemic. We have issues with gun violence, opioids, all these epidemics. So, and I'm not saying that wireless radiation is to blame for all these epidemics, but I'm going to talk about a bit about the basic science, because as far as the mechanism goes, it is possible to link many of these epidemics with exposure to microwave radiation. It doesn't prove it, but there are links there that are very important and need to be paid attention to. Okay, I don't want to go over on time, so I'm going to skip this point. So I think that basic, just what do we need to understand about the science of wireless radiation? So the most important message here is that in order for a human to be healthy, the body just needs to be able to do its thing. We need to have we have essential housekeeping functions that scientists call homeostasis. And what we know from tens of thousands of peer-reviewed publications is that wireless radiation interrupts these basic homeostatic mechanisms of the body. So this is just a partial list, and we're going to make these slides available. Everything here is cited, so you can go directly to the reference if you're curious. But the bottom line is that wireless radiation causes damage in the body at multiple levels. Oh, can you go back, Theodora? Just go back to that last slide. So this is just a couple of examples that it causes oxidative stress, it causes DNA damage, it causes all sorts of issues that are linked with many chronic conditions that we are dealing with, particularly in internal medicine. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So one of the most important things to understand is that, and I bring up diabetes just because it's the diabetes epidemic is just a huge, it's economically unsustainable what's been going on. And it's old CDC data that they say that children born after 2000, their chance of becoming diabetic for all comers is 1 in 3, and for Hispanic females, it's 1 in 2. The cost of treating diagnosed diabetes in the USA is $327 billion. And 1 in 7 of our healthcare dollars are spent treating diabetes and its complications. So even if there is a small number of people who have an increased chance of diabetes coming from wireless radiation exposure, that would be significant when you extrapolate it onto an entire population. So we have good evidence to show associations between wireless radiation and diabetes. And I just put up a couple of examples on this slide. So as early as 1971, it's documented in the U.S. Naval Medical Research Institute. They did a big topic review of microwave radiation and health effects. And they showed pretty clear evidence of symptoms associated with diabetes in this paper. There are other studies that researchers, they've used Wi-Fi, so 2.45 gigahertz in the lab to create a diabetic animal model in the rat. There are a couple of articles like this, and they're not really, the article isn't about the Wi-Fi making the rat diabetic. The article is about, they made the rat diabetic so they could test various supplements to see if they reduce the effects of the oxidative stress or radiation. So the point is, microwave radiation can make animals diabetic in certain models. That is very worrisome. The third thing is that other research suggests that the closer you live to a cell tower, the higher your blood glucose and the greater your chance of becoming diabetic. The final thing is that oxidative stress is a key mechanism in the development of diabetes, along with many other of our epidemic conditions. But the issue is that the pancreas has very poor defenses against oxidative stress from the radiation. If we hold our phones, or especially in children, if they're putting their Chromebooks or tablets right over their abdomen where the pancreas is, they're causing oxidative stress to the pancreas. So it's really biologically plausible that we're microwaving an entire generation of children, and there are very serious concerns about the links with diabetes. Next slide, please. So as far as 5G goes, Senator Blumenthal had said that when he spoke to the FCC, something about us flying blind, that we didn't have any information about 5G. The purpose of this slide really is to talk about millimeter wave technology, which is the higher frequency microwave, or it's like the highest end of radio frequency radiation, which is the 300 megahertz to 300 gigahertz. And just point out that despite what you read in the papers, because there's a lot of claims made that these higher frequencies are safer because they don't penetrate the skin. This is what they say. But if you really look into the peer-reviewed literature, you'll see that millimeter wave technology has already been proven to be biologically active. So we know that it has effects. It's been shown to demonstrate cataracts and other forms to the eye, other damage to the eye, damage to the immune system, antibiotic resistance, and the most concerning of all the effects are the effects on the nervous system, because the claim that these waves don't penetrate the skin, therefore they are safer, this could be debunked by any medical student, because take the example of sunlight shining on the skin. That doesn't penetrate your skin, but we know that it sets off a whole cascade of neuroendocrine effects. So the point is that there's a lot of evidence on the millimeter wave technology, which is what is planned to be used in 5G combined with these lower frequencies at some point in the future. Next slide, Theodora. So to sum it up, microwave radiation is an environmental toxin, and really, there isn't anything to debate. The peer-reviewed literature, particularly articles by independent scientists, are very clear, and we have more than enough evidence needed to take action from a public health standpoint, as far as warning the public, educating physicians and other public health officers, so we can really intervene and lower our exposures. We know from the National Toxicology Program cell phone study that we've got clear evidence of cancer in the heart and brain. We have clear evidence of DNA damage, which is a precursor to cancer and all sorts of other bad outcomes. And I know there's a lot of people I believe there's a lot of people interested in healthcare in this audience. There's also clear evidence of cardiomyopathy, which is heart damage. Cardiomyopathy leads to congestive heart failure. And congestive heart failure is on the rise in this country. I should have gotten the citation, but there's a very recent article that came out showing that the incidence of new cases has gone up significantly in younger populations. So this is very important for people that work in the healthcare industry, particularly in administration, to understand that looking at lowering microwave exposure in hospitalized populations, for instance, in nursing homes, sensitive populations, I believe that outcomes can be improved, length of stay can be reduced by lowering exposure. So really, to sum it up, we have multiple epidemics of chronic disease in the US, and mechanistically, they link to microwave exposure and oxidative stress. We have unsustainable healthcare costs, so now there's an economic imperative to address this issue. And microwave exposure is, from the public health perspective, this is a public health intervention that really could have a huge effect on the US population as far as healthcare costs, because we know that all humans are affected, and therefore, and there are certain tweaks, certain interventions we could do that could make a huge difference at the policy level and government level. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me get to the other slides. So what I'm going to talk about is, where our time is.
Oh, no, we're doing good.
Is it okay?
Yeah, no, we're doing good.
Okay. So wireless companies do warn their shareholders about this risk, but they don't inform the customers or residents who are living near cell towers. And I put up there, and on Environmental Health Trust, we actually have entire pages dedicated to these issues. One on the statements in the 10K filings by cell phone companies or Crown Castle. That's a company that puts up, it sort of rents, it's like a realtor, like they rent the space and then they get the carriers to put their stuff on, where they say if radio frequency emissions from wireless handsets or equipment are demonstrated to cause negative health effects, potential future claims could adversely affect our operations, costs, or revenues. And we currently do not maintain any significant insurance with respect to these manners. Now, they don't have insurance because about over 2 decades ago, or actually more than that, the insurance companies pulled out of covering mobile phone operators in the United States when the first brain cancer cases became public. EMFs are defined as a pollutant by cell phone companies when you get a cell phone device protection packet. And insurance white papers rank potential future impacts as high, and it is industry standard to exclude electromagnetic field damages from insurance coverages from many coverage policies you can get. So there are a lot of white paper reports that rank this, talk about it as being sort of like asbestos in terms of if the potential risk were to be realized, the impact it would have on the insurance industry. And you can go onto our website to see more on that. Our United States has among the highest allowable levels of radiation in comparison to other countries. And it's a little complicated how our limits are set up, but in terms, this is just for the 900 megahertz electrical field. But you can see that there are other countries in Europe, China, Russia's not here, which also has a lower limit, Italy, Belgium, Brussels, which allow less radiation. And this is in terms of the environmental level, the amount that, you know, you're walking outside, what is your full body exposure? It's considered very low level by industry, although to ourselves, it is not low. But as you can see, we allow a lot along with Japan and Australia. However, with 5G, and this is clips from an industry Ericsson slide set on 5G deployment, where they are saying that the countries that have more restrictive limits, like Belgium, Italy, Poland, Switzerland, that since 5G is going to increase the radiation, especially near the antenna, that they need to change those limits. So the rollout of 5G networks will be a major problem, just quoting from this deck, which is all online as well on Environmental Health Trust. So there is going to be, it's been documented, the rise in radiation, the wireless radiation levels with our current technologies over the last few decades, and this is going to take it to the next level. Now, how did we get in this situation? Briefly, the EPA was defunded in 1996, and there's a great review of the Following the Money by a Harvard Press captured agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industry it presumably regulates. Talks about how the FCC is a captured agency, and compares the issue to tobacco in terms of the tactics, in terms of the money. They look at Congress, they look at the FCC, and how our FCC commissioners are a former, Verizon lawyers and etc. So most recently, just as an update on what's happening, there have been members of Congress writing to the FCC and the FDA, and they are asking for safety data on 5G. They have not received any adequate response. What Blumenthal and Eschew were the first to write in December, and they actually received a response, and you can go online and watch a Senate hearing where Senator Blumenthal states, as Dr. Goldberg said, we are flying blind on health and safety. He criticizes the response he got from the FDA and the FCC as being just unsubstantial, and also asks industry, what research have you done to make sure this technology is safe, at which they said there is none. And I'm not going to go over all this except to say that there are bills moving forward. There are resolutions in different states, in Montana, a city in Florida, Greendale, Wisconsin, starting to raise this issue because of the stripping of local authority. But especially with House Bill 522 in New Hampshire, which I believe made it through one vote, and I don't know where, I think it's in committee right now. They wanted to establish a commission to study the environmental and health effects of 5G, and they have a list of the most incredible questions that the commission should review. One being, why are these scientists appealing to protect people and nothing has been done? And in the United States and also internationally, there are many actions moving forward on reducing exposure to wireless and also addressing the small cell rollout by putting ordinances that have setbacks from homes to the wireless facilities, as well as banning them in neighborhoods and putting in permitting processes to slow them down. And now, Melissa, if you want to briefly talk about the impact of being injured by wireless and more. Melissa is a A320 airplane captain who actually has disability due to her injuries and works all the time advocating on this issue.
Thanks, Theodora. Yeah, so
Whoops.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm an A320 captain. I'm still working at my airline, but I'm on permanent disability until I retire, unless I'm able to go back and my health improves enough to go back. But I flew for 25 years and had no problem with wireless until probably about 2005. So I had no problem with any wireless on board the aircraft. It wasn't until the infrastructure for cell phones was put in that I started having issues. So back in 2005, I had a well-intentioned relative that gave me a cell phone because I was on the road a lot, and I was using it for about 6 weeks, and I used it like once a week on my way home in the car for a couple hours. And during this time, my face would start going numb on the side of the side I was using the phone. So at the 6-week mark, I'd used the phone for about a minute, and my face went numb for 2 weeks. So I had to go off the line for a month while I went and got a MRI, which was clear, and then sent back to work. So, my life continued, and I was fine. I just didn't use a cell phone anymore. And then in 2010, we had moved already beside a TV radio tower, and in 2010, they started putting the 4G system through Canada, and one of the cell towers went in behind our home, and I noticed immediately, my sleep changed immediately. I started getting ringing in my ears. I was nauseous in the house, or it was actually an apartment, and I had a whole host of symptoms I couldn't explain. I was gaining weight, even though I was working out a lot, and I developed a pretty severe chemical sensitivity. I was getting like nerve twitching and even like hot spots, like heating up on my skin suddenly, and that's the only place that's ever happened was in that apartment. And then they put up a second cell tower, and very shortly after that, I became like severely and fully electrosensitive. So what happened with me, and it's not the same with everyone, but in my case, I could actually feel the devices. So if you were standing in front of me, especially in a low coverage area with your cell phone, I could feel the sharpness of the signal trying to connect with the cell tower on my body from the direction of the device. And obviously that's very shocking to have happen to someone. You never feel this in your whole life, and all of a sudden you're feeling everything around you. And it was correct. So and it was really easy to tell what the devices were that were bothering me. And I continued to work for a while, and then and I should mention also that we ended up buying equipment to measure like a new home that we were going to hopefully get, and because we had to move from that apartment. And the levels in my apartment were 800 times that of my aircraft. And we use radar at work, and we have transponders on the aircraft. So it was, surprising to see that my home was that high. And so, once you're electrosensitive, you, become suddenly aware of the extreme limitations you have. And these limitations, if you could put the slide up for me, Theodora.
It's up.
It's up. Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, these limitations are quite extensive. So, and it's not, there's some examples up there. And it's not just, people who are using technology extensively, although a lot of people who do become electrosensitive first. But, it's like everybody. I mean, I've even had calls from, I get people calling me all the time because I've been very public about my illness, and it's been in the paper. So I help people as much as I can. But, I've had calls from models and tech executives and, rock, like people who are in rock bands and and then you're in just regular people as well with, children and elderly people. And it's not just the physical disability that you have to deal with. You also have to deal with, the economic poverty, because your whole family, now that you can't work, is affected. You have to deal with the social poverty because now you can't participate in society anymore. Like you can't go and visit your friends because they may live near a cell tower or have wireless in their homes, and to have that all turned off just for you to come over, or to have people come over to your house and who don't want to part with their cell phones. It's very difficult, and people don't understand. And there's a lot of stigma attached to this, which is really unfortunate because people do need help. And the other thing you have to contend with is medical poverty. And I cannot state this enough. People who are electrosensitive are no longer able to do things that others take for granted. For example, like going to a hospital. There is a lot of wireless in hospitals now. They have Wi-Fi through multiple Wi-Fi systems through the hospitals. They have cordless phones even, and there's more and more of these devices being put in, and that makes it totally inaccessible to people with electrosensitivity. On top of that, they also often, just for the revenue, put cell panels on top of these buildings. And it also impacts things like, if you want to get an education. So for myself, I was fortunate enough, I was already had a career, I'm able to get disability, but there are many people that can't. If you're a child and you become electrosensitive, you're not going to be attending school. You're not going to be going to university realistically, and you're not going to really be able to work anywhere in the future because everywhere has wireless. So it's a terrible situation for children. And even like driving a car now, because cars are filled with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and radar, and now they're going to self-driving vehicles. And I can tell you right now that self-driving vehicles will never be an option for people with electrosensitivity. It's just not an option. And often you can't even live in your own house. So, if you have a neighbor that's putting has a couple of Wi-Fi routers in their house, or there's a cell tower near your house, a lot of people will vacate their home, and that's what happened to myself. I ended up leaving my house for most of a 2-year period, and I actually came down to the States, which brings me to a interesting place in the States. There is a radio-free zone. It's actually the only legally protected radio-free zone in the entire world. In Green Bank, West Virginia, and we tried to start one here in Canada, but the government told us flat out that they would sue us if we tried to do such a thing. So I ended up forgetting about trying to do that and left and went and lived in Green Bank for a while. And it's there to protect a bunch of telescopes. I think there's 9 or 10 telescopes, radio telescopes that listen to the universe and do research for people all over the world in organizations all over the world. And there's a flood of people, even though it's not protected for people, there's a flood of people from all over the world going down, of electrosensitive people heading down there for relief. And people even show up there, can't even speak English. They come off the plane and they're at I don't know how they get to the library there, and then they're, assisted by people that are already living there. But, people are in that area are living in, there's not enough places to rent. It's a really rural area in West Virginia, and people are living in cars with their pets, and, they're in tents and cabins if they can afford one. And some people have bought homes there. But it's a fantastic place since it's already protected, and they already have legal rules for reducing radiation in those areas, wireless in those areas, that it would be a perfect place as a relief area or shelter for anybody that's reacting to this technology. So I hope that there is some effort in the future to make that a reality for the people that need access to something like that. But the reality of all of this is that there is this problem isn't going away. It's an increasing group of people that have been impacted by this technology, and most of them couldn't even be on this call to talk to you. And it's only 9 years later that I'm able to do some of the things I could do before, and with a lot of medical intervention. And because I'm on disability and have some income, I'm able to do that, but most people don't have that option, and they end up leading pretty horrific lives, and all of that is entirely preventable. So the only thing I'd say, I'll just add, the solution is, what is the solution to this? But, if I had my druthers, I guess I'd ask that, people in the future, when they're building hospitals, they actually incorporate wired wired instead of wireless into the hospitals, and same with nursing homes and schools. These are essential things for people in the world, and they need to be accessible for the entire population. And anyway, thank you for letting me speak.
Oh, that was very good. Excuse me. That was very, very good. You know, and as that usual on these conversations we have, the problems, which everybody sort of already feels might be a problem, is infinitely worse than anyone thought that it was. And in truth, you know, look, we're so far down this rat hole, and the whole world's kind of in this mad rush. You know, if we don't do it because they're going to do it over in this country, and so everybody's sort of seemingly obligated to participate, like it or not. I don't see how there's going to be an opportunity to really reverse it in certain respects. I mean, it seems like it's so a juggernaut already for consumers. It's almost, we need to figure out, like those safe spaces you described, but how can I create one where I'm at, where I don't have that luxury of going to West Virginia? So what are the solutions, would you say? Because there's a few things I could ask you about, but the key would be, you know, how do you protect yourself in today's world, assuming 5G is going to be around other than moving or whatever? You know, what can you physically do? And then what can we legislatively do to help other than, you know, participating in your organization? In fact, why don't you bring up your website for a minute while we're talking here?
Okay, let me get out of this.
Yeah, let's see your site for a quick minute. But yeah, what you know, what can be done? I mean, it's great that you're raising the alarm, but boy, I'll tell you, it seems like it's such a foregone conclusion. And as you said, it's a captured agency. It's going to be pretty brutal for consumers who should be in the driver's seat, of course, to get into the driver's seat.
You know, there's a lot of action happening though on 5G. I had some other slides showing in other countries where, and in the United States, we had, I think it was over a dozen cities protesting. But in other countries where there's, well, I don't, there's like Switzerland, several regions where they are halting 5G. Brussels, Belgium has stated they will not up their radiation levels. And so it's halted, although it's temporary until elections. But I think that getting organized on this, there are several fronts to work on. I can certainly talk about, we can talk about how to reduce exposure at home. We can talk about the political. Where do you think is the best to focus first?
Well, just briefly, since everybody's like individually affected, what's kind of the quick thumbnail, or where can you go to find out what I should do at my home and for myself when I'm out and about?
We do have, like, can you see this? I think, like,
Yes.
under educate yourself,
Yes.
there's how to reduce cell phone radiation, and then steps to safer technology at home. And there's lists of like how to keep a distance from your phone, not to put it on your body. In terms of home, using corded landline phones, also non-wireless connections. So like I'm plugged in with an Ethernet. There are a lot of changes that can be made in how you use technology in your home and when you go out too. So we have all of that online. We have printable information under resources to share as well.
And Theodora, let me add one other thing. Another suggestion is that the Institute for Building Biology has a list of certified building biologists who are electromagnetic radiation specialists. If someone is really interested in understanding what they can do to reduce their exposures to electromagnetic fields in the home, really the best thing to do is to get in touch with a building biologist and have them come and do an evaluation of the home. Because they use professional meters, and it can be very enlightening. And often there can be small things that a person does in their home. For instance, if let's say their bed is on the same side as where the electrical service drop is, you can move the bed, you can flip fuses at night, but you need a person to actually go into the home and do the assessment. And that's called, Theodora, is that on your website somewhere?
We talk about going to experts. I don't know if I can go to the website right now, the building biology website.
Well, it's called the Institute for Building Biology and Ecology. And then they have a find a building biologist. And you can find someone in your area.
And while you're searching for that, Jeff, Charlie here, Was it Theodora or Melissa with whom I was speaking a while ago about the telecom law that barred health concerns as a way to slow down a 5G deployment? Did you already discuss that in today's presentation and how we can reverse that?
Yeah, no, I didn't mention that. That's really important. So the Telecom Act in 1996, which was one of the most heavily lobbied bill in the United States and may still well be, there's section 704 that says you can't argue environmental issues as long as the radiation levels are within FCC limits in regards to the siting of a tower. And then there was case law that happened because immediately people sued on that, which actually further strengthened that, so that some circuits are interpreting it so that you can't, a council people or local authorities can't, if you talk about health, they can't say, well, because we're worried about health, we're not going to allow an installation here. So when you go to a council meeting, they tell you, well, we can't talk about health. That's a, unconstitutional law. And many experts believe it's an overreach of the statute. Yeah, that's the situation. In fact, the recent FCC ruling eliminated environmental review as well.
How convenient. All right, that was actually
hand raised, Jeff.
Yeah, I was just saying, let's go for some questions there. Anyone's going to do the hand raise? Here, I've got David.
Yeah, click the hand raise button, folks, on that little panel, and then Jeff will call on you.
David, go for it.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Theodora, Sharon, and Melissa, for a thoughtful presentation. My concerns are on the legal side that you addressed as a solution. I have a couple of brief observations and then a couple of questions for you. A Cato spokesman recently said that those who take government scientific studies seriously need to have their heads examined. Secondly, I would observe that oversight is synonymous with surveillance, with the inherent privacy concerns that go along with that. The bottom line is that despite being conditioned by government information suppression, as we all are, your scientific information I trust far more than government information. If government is in fact suppressing or misrepresenting scientific concerns, why should we trust government to pass laws to protect us from microwaves? Should we look to the private sector for solutions instead?
Can I answer that, Theodora, or at least make a few comments? So Jeff, here's my thought. You raised really good points, and I believe that what's going to drive change in this with this issue is that I believe that there's an emerging opportunity for for private industry to explore the field of healthy technology. For instance, instead of looking at 5G and wireless and this government-sanctioned microwaving of the entire population, I've heard from actually some of the smartest people I know who are physicists and scientists who work in this field. Their suggestion has been, really, we should scrap 5G and go straight to 6G, which in their minds is a system that asks the question, what do humans need from their technology and their devices to be healthy? How can you make a healthy car that doesn't expose people to all sorts of different electromagnetic fields? How can you solve the problems of exposure that we have with wireless radiation by developing making our devices safer? Because there are so many things that we can do. And there's a really interesting economic incentive. And I think that, so I do believe that the push for this will come from private industry. I also believe that people who, the private healthcare, health insurance companies and commercial payers, this could be potentially a huge avenue for quality improvement and for cost savings. Because having a building biologist or just training someone to come to the home, lower electromagnetic field exposures in patients that have diagnoses that are costing these companies the most, their most expensive patients. It's very likely that lowering EMF exposures in these patients would save the insurance companies money. So I think that there are lots of ways to look at this and to ask that question: what are the opportunities for private, for private industry? Those are my comments.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree, and I would add, because these hardware and software changes in research and development by industry is key. But there is, if you're interested in this too, Frank Clegg, who's the former Microsoft Canada president, who's presented several times on this issue. There was a 5G forum, if you're interested in watching lecture videos, where he spoke on this very issue, as well as several other experts on 5G, but about industry response. And that's online on our YouTube channel under, I think, Michigan 5G Forum would be the title of the playlist online.
Excellent. Bertan, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi. So my question is, if again, going towards sort of private solutions, if somebody wanted to buy a big tract of land and make it radio free, number one, how much land would you have to have in order for it to really be a, let's say there's EMFs all around that land, how much land would you need to have? And two, could you legally exclude, can local jurisdictions or nearby jurisdictions legally force you to have installations or towers or that sort of thing? Or does that vary from state to state?
It's going to vary, but there's also satellites that are going up, which will be beaming down technology as well, which we didn't mention, but is a whole other level of that's sort of happening now, and it's unknown, specifically where and how much, depending on who. Melissa, do you know more about that? Yeah. The satellites?
Yeah. There's so like up until a couple of years ago, there was probably about 1,500 operating satellites in the whole planet. I think there was 3,000 of them up there, but only 1,500 were operating. And right now, there's about at least 8 companies that are going to be putting up between like 5,000 to 7,000 satellites each company over the next couple of years, and they're launching them like as we speak all over the place. And they're micro satellites, and they will form a giant network around the planet. Unfortunately, like overlapping with each other, and that's part of the problem, is that it's not just one company doing it; it's multiple companies doing the exact same thing, and so having to repeat the exposure over everybody. And those will be connected with technology on the ground, and it just depends. Like we were looking at it when they wanted to put all those what do you call them, the those Theodora, help me with this. Like when they wanted to launch those little, they weren't satellites, they were the other.
The parachutes. The parachute.
The balloons. Yeah, the loon balloons, right?
Balloons. Yeah, loons.
And they were going to be like right over top of just over 60,000 feet, and we had an engineer look at the redacted documents that were sent to the FCC, and they were going to be like an excessive number for like the amount that was going to be hitting the ground was too much for people for sure that are electrosensitive to be okay. And the other thing is that all these signals were like right over top of aircraft, and at the time, and I think it's still applicable right now, there was for 2 different aircraft, one was a 737 and one was a 787. If they had certain screens put into their aircraft, they had to have them changed over a 5-year period because the satellite signals and Wi-Fi and cell towers, and they named them all in the airworthiness directive, were interfering with the screens and blanking them out. And so, we wrote to the FCC about that, a group of us that were concerned about, they're only going to be a few thousand feet above aircraft, and so far they haven't been allowed in the United States like they were supposed to. So I don't know if that was part of the reason that they're not going ahead with that right now. I'm not really sure why that is, but these are things you have to consider, right? Like there's a lot of interference, and you're going to be having it from. It's not just health effects either, right? and it's, interference with aircraft, which, don't need to be interfered with. Like, I mean, they're, they need to be kept safe.
Is
So,
there,
I mean, there's,
sorry.
no, just, there's things that happened a few years ago. They were trying to, I think, Tom Wheeler's first thing when he was the head of the FCC for a while, and the first thing he wanted to do was put working cell phones on aircraft, and, like you could make a phone call on an aircraft, and the transport commissioner at the time stepped in and stopped that because that's unsafe for aircraft. And people want to use these devices on aircraft, and it's really not an appropriate place to be doing that.
I'll tell you one thing, it's going to be a noisy environment. We're at the kind of at the end of our conclusion of the event today here a little bit. We're just hitting 5. So I wanted to see if there was any kind of last comments you wanted to make, and we'll follow up on this for sure, because this is really going to affect everybody in a big way. And it's really sad to see what potentially is going to happen to kids, because it's a grand experiment we're in the midst of with them.
Yeah, I have one comment to wrap up, because I think that this is something that people don't really understand about biological effects of microwave radiation. When we think about people who have developed electrosensitivity, and what Melissa has discussed, I think a lot of people don't understand that what has happened to Melissa and what's happened to people all over the world is the tip of an iceberg of symptoms of exposure to microwave radiation. But it's only the tip of one iceberg, and we have multiple icebergs of disease. So you look at the population, people, you can get 100 people exposed to the same frequencies, the exact same situation, and they will develop different patterns of disease. So it isn't that people with electrical sensitivity are harmed more than others. They're harmed in a different way, and they're able to make the connection between their exposure and their symptoms. So I just think that's a really important point, because I think that often people will hear stories like Melissa's and say, oh, well, that's what's happening to those people, but I don't feel it, so I'm okay. But that's really not the case.
They're like the canary in the coal mine compared to everybody else.
Well, they have cancer and other presentations.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Actually, I'd like to comment on that. It's Melissa. Just because I do go in and help other people make their home safer if they're unable to afford a building biologist. And often when I do, we'll turn all the wireless off and change the electrical, find if there's any wiring errors and all these things. And for the electrosensitive person, but very, very often the other people in the family who have a different illness, like Sharon was saying, will actually get better, depending on what the illness is, of course. If it's not, but it happens all the time. I see this all the time.
Sure,
the whole family feels better, and they,
Yeah, it's becoming much more of an issue, and luckily you're out there, making the clarion call, and again, also to kind of impact, like you said, it's coming from so many angles and directions. Somebody sort of needs to sit at the center of that to keep an eye on which assault we're being under, so we can be armed and forewarned a little. So this is excellent. So I appreciate you coming today. This was really great. Charles, if you want to kind of close us out here a little bit, so we're stay within our few minutes after type scenario. I'll put up the screen for you to be able to show where to share this with others that you're engaged with. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. And wonderful presentation, Theodora, Melissa, and Sharon. So, I myself turn off Wi-Fi at night for my small kiddies, and I agree with you. As we try to bring back wires, that will help folks, and a lot of folks won't even realize how much it will help until they try it. And I think we'll have other guests on health issues going forward that might mix with your cause. There are other icebergs, Sharon, as you mentioned, with other health interventions that we'll be exploring in future webinars. So folks, please come back. We're not going to shy away from controversy, because these are critical. And Jeff and I are engaged commercially to cut health costs, so this is definitely a big one. So real quick, again, future guests, we're going to go entrepreneurial next Wednesday with Bob Berg from Go Giver, big motivational speaker. And we do want the entrepreneurs out there making the world a better place. And then back to whistleblowers in 2 weeks with John Kiriakou, who was jailed for exposing CIA torture. That's a big issue to protect whistleblowers. They are really hammered by the government. They're trying to tell us what's going on in the bowels of the state. In 3 weeks, we go big picture with Larry Reed, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education. And then in 4 weeks, we're going to get into transportation. How do we speed up transportation and freight shipping and getting working all the waterways with the Jones Act repeal. So that's a specific issue, but it has big impacts on the highways and trains and canals and all that. So that's a preview, Jeff.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. Needless to say, this is some information well worth sharing. And so look for the notice on Monday. It'll give you all the updates and some of the links that you're going to want to go to. And we'll be ready for next week. There's another exciting time out there. We're going to see how we can get ourselves cranked up a little bit, and this will all be a benefit to everyone once again. Thanks for coming today.